안녕하세요, Cloud입니다. Hey guys, Cloud here. Welcome back to another lesson of how to study Korean. Today we're going to cover lesson 11. So this is the 12th Learn Korean with Cloud episode, because episode 11 was actually the recap, the one where I went through and mentioned like what your level should be after finishing the first 10 lessons and what you should expect and what you should work on. So that was 11. So this is 12, even though it says lesson 11. So if you haven't checked out that episode, go ahead. For now, let's jump right into the lesson. So going over the vocab, it's really easy, I'll be honest. It's just 월 for month, and then you add the numbers. So I think that was last lesson, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 1 through 12. Notice I mentioned this last time, there are sometimes sound change rules. So for 10, it's not 10월, it's 10월. For June, it's not 6월, it's 6월. So here he makes a note, not 10월 and 6월. Click on the English words below. So there's also some nouns, verbs. I'd say if you can learn the numbers, the months, and just commit them to memory, that should be more than enough. Obviously, you should learn all of them, but you don't have to. 이상하다 is really common. I would learn that one too. All of these, like 요리하다, 요리사, I think is here too. All of these are pretty common. I don't think any of these are not. These you don't necessarily have to memorize because we're going to talk about them, and hopefully through the explanation, you'll understand how to make them without memorizing them. For days 1, 2, and 3, you should learn these. For this is funny. You should definitely learn this one this year. I'm not gonna say why, but make sure you learn it. And then what else? 보통, pretty common, usually. All right, introduction. So we learned how to use the numbers in lesson 10. Now we can say that use the numbers. Like I did this for 2 months, or I didn't do Y last week. You will also learn whether you should use pure Korean or Sino-Korean numbers when using these different words of time. So we mentioned a little bit last lesson, and we said that we would continue to give you more guidance on which set of numbers you should use. This will be one of those times. So the use of pure Korean or Sino-Korean numbers may seem random, but there's a reason for it. Anytime the time word is of Chinese origin, the Sino-Korean numbers are used. For example, 개월, because 월 is using the Sino-Korean, or 개월, sorry, is of the Chinese origin, so that's why we use the Sino-Korean numbers. Now, 달 is pure Korean, thus it's counted using Korean numbers. A lot of Korean words are of Chinese origin, from Hanja. You'll learn about those later. Does he have lessons? I think he actually has lessons on them. Let's actually click the link here. Yeah, he does. He has like 20 lessons. That's cool. I did not know that. Or I did know that, but I wasn't sure. Anyways, this lesson's a little bit less organized than the previous lessons. It's difficult to teach everything in this lesson together because you need to have a mutual understanding of all concepts in order to understand one of them. In order to understand how to use 동안, you need to know how to use 주. In order to understand how to use 주, you need to understand how to use 동안. Around and around we go. Anyways, I made it as simple as possible after this lesson. Anytime you learn about other time grammar concepts, it should be really easy because this lesson will give you a solid base to work from. Now, I think I did a pretty good job explaining this in the lesson recap. I think this is the lesson. Yeah, I think I did a pretty good job recapping. I didn't recap everything. It's a very long lesson. But I think I did a pretty good job explaining things in a order. I think I went through a different order. It's been a few months since I made it, but I remember going through it and trying to reorganize it and wondering, should I put this here or there, or what exactly should I do? So if you're confused, I would recommend checking out the lesson recap on the How to Study Korean YouTube channel. And if you're still confused, go over some of the additional videos that are in the description, so like the lesson practice videos. And if you're still confused, then pick up like one section and just try using it as much as possible. With your Korean exchange partners, just use it. A bunch of sentences, doesn't have to be in context, just throw it out there, be like, what are you talking about? It's like, just trying it out, seeing if it's right or wrong. And then once you master that little section, move on to the next section. I can understand this can be difficult. It can be confusing. It's not hard, it's just interrelated, and then you wonder, what am I supposed to use? So I think practice and a lot of exposure will do a lot of good. So let's start with 동안. It just means for a certain amount of time. So 동안 is a very useful word that can be used to indicate how long an action occurs. So for 2 days, 이틀 동안, for 2 days, 10분 동안, 2분 동안. 동안 can also be used to indicate that action occurs. This is another thing. You can use it while another action. So while I'm eating, I also run. I don't know. This is lesson 33, so not anytime soon. Let me just look. Does he talk about 면서? No. 는 중. Okay. Notice that there's no additional particle that's added to 동안. One would think that a would be added, but it's not. I've never heard 동안에. Maybe I have. I'm not sure. 저는 10분 동안 걸었어요. I walked for 10 minutes. 30분 동안 공부했어요. I studied for 30 minutes. While the translation of 동안 in these examples is usually for, in essence, what you are doing is stating for that period of time. So just remember that. Understanding this will help you learn, he says the same thing, yeah. Will help you understand later usages of 동안 in future lessons. So he just changes the translation. That's another thing he mentions a lot. Don't focus too much on the translation. Focus on the meaning that he's trying to convey. So 저는 이틀 동안 안 잤어요. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Now remember, it doesn't matter if you use the word or the numeral when writing a number. However, typically the word is written when a pure Korean word is used with a counter, like 개, 명, 번, 시간, 대, 살, etc. In situations where Sino-Korean numbers are written, for example, like these over here, it makes no difference. So 한 개, 두 개, you would write them out instead of writing two. This feels a little bit weird to me. Also remember the spacing is different depending on if you write a numeral or a word. If you're writing the word, there should be a space. 저는 10분 동안 걸었어요. He says this is fine. I don't think I ever seen this before. I always see it as 10, like the numeral, but he's probably right. I'm probably just haven't experienced it. He's lived in Korea, I haven't. He probably knows more than I do. Alright, I want to show you more and more examples of 동안, and I expect you might not want to limit yourself to only 분, which is minutes. So you should know this. I haven't talked about... Did I talk about this last time? I think, yeah, we did. We talked about minutes, the counters in Korean, before. And we even gave examples of like 2 sheets of paper. Sheets is just a counter. All right, hours, 시간. So we can say 30 minutes, 30분. Now we can also say the hour by adding 시. So like here, 3시. So 3시 20분 means 3:20. So 20 minutes. 20분 동안 means 20 minutes. Now, when talking about hours, 시 is used when talking about the hour on the clock. So if you're saying what time it is, you would use 시. This can also be a little confusing. 시간 is used when you're counting hours. So I did this for 3 hours. So here you see, for 3 hours, 3시간 동안. It's not 3시 동안. 3시 is 3 o'clock. So you can kind of think of 시 as a clock. And then 시간 as hours. So for 3 hours. Sorry about that. Remember that the pure Korean numbers are used when talking about hours. So that's why we're using 세. So 하나, 둘, 셋. And we get rid of the 받침, 세. And we use those numbers for hours. I usually write out the Korean word when I'm referring to the amount of hours. What do? I think 1, 2, 3, 4 하나 둘 셋 넷 I would write them out, and then after that I'd probably just write the number, but I've definitely seen both, so I don't think it matters. But I guess here he's writing out the Korean word. Does it matter? Let me check here. Sorry, it can get confusing. So typically the word is written. So yeah, I guess typically the word is written, and I just don't always do that, which might be atypical. So listen to what he says. But just know that if you're atypical, you're not alone. 저는 3시간 동안 잤어요. I slept for 3 hours. 1시간 동안 달렸어요. I ran for 1 hour. 8시간 동안 운전했어요. I drove for 8 hours. I should slow down. Notice, okay, 보다? Where is 보다? Here. 저는 어제 2시간 동안 TV를 봤어요. I watched TV for 2 hours yesterday. Notice that 보다, to see, is used for when you watch something. So you can also use 보다 when you watch a performance or a concert or something like that. In English, you say, I saw a TV and I watched TV. Have two different meanings, but in Korean, you simply say I see TV. I see TV, huh? At this point, you're probably asking, okay, I understand how to say that I have done things for X hours or X minutes. But what if I wanted to say something like I'll eat in 3 hours or I ate 3 hours ago? Like I will go in 10 minutes or I came 10 minutes ago. You'll learn how to make these sentences in lesson 24, which is when we start learning how to make multiple clause sentences, which is a big step forward, because right now all our sentences is like one sentence, like one clause. I watched TV for 2 hours yesterday. We add a little spice, a little information here and there, but we don't say like yesterday while I was eating before I came home, I watched TV. That would be still one sentence, but it's multiple clauses. We haven't learned that, but starting in lesson 24, so 13 lessons from now, you'll start getting a bit more complicated, and then you'll be like, oh wait, trying to connect the dots. And then you'll perfect that, and then you'll move on to harder stuff. All right, there's a ton of content to listen, so we're not going to talk about that here. 초, seconds. It's exactly the same. You're going to use the Sino-Korean numbers. So 1, 초, 2초, 2초 동안. I don't know when you would want to say for 2 seconds. I don't know why you would want to say I ran for 2 seconds. 저는 2초 동안 달렸어요. Oh, you could say this. I'm sorry, my head. Ow. 1분은 sorry. I just got a random head pain. 60초입니다. 1 minute is 60 seconds. All right, next. Am I too close to the monitor? Is that why this is happening to me? Let's do this. Let's move back. You should stay 1 arm length away. I was just close because the microphone was close, but I forgot to just pull the microphone out, which makes sense. 지난 and 다음 are 2 words. Okay, so these words are really, really, really useful. 지난주에, so like I was saying with, like if you go back here, I know we're moving around a lot, but I just want to make it clear. So you could memorize 지난주 is last week, 지난달 is last month, 이번 주 is this week, 다음 주 is next week, 다음 달 is next month. You could go around and memorize them like that, but if you understand 지난 is last, like the previous one, and then 다음 is the next one, then all you need to know is the word for week, which is 주, and the word for month, which is 달, and then you can, mix and match. Or you can memorize them, it's completely up to you. But I just understood the meaning of 지난 and 다음, and then you can use it for other stuff, because you might say 다음 수업, like next class, or 다음 경기, like next game, or 다음, I don't know, like 지난, I'm blanking, 지난 something, I don't know. You get the point, like last something or next something. You can use it not just with month and year. You can say like last year as well, or you wouldn't use these words. I am blanking out on examples. This is why you don't go improvise. But you get the point. Like last episode, last week. Yeah, it's only last week that's coming to mind. All right. 지난 and 다음 are two words that you can use in many situations that I can't think of clearly, including in situations related to time. So we're going to talk about that. In lesson 10, we learned 마지막, which means the final. So it also means last. So you might think 지난 and 다음 are the same thing. 지난 is the previous. 마지막 is the final. The one, it can be like in the past, like, oh, the last exam I had, or it can be in the future, or the last exam I will have. So it's not exactly like in the present or the future. Kind of 지난 is always in the past. The last one, the previous one. You can't say the previous exam I will have. That just doesn't make any sense. Again, I think I explained this pretty well in the video that I made. I think it was one of the longer videos. I mean, we can check here, right? Lesson 11, right? How to study Korean. Videos, lesson 10. It is 5 minutes long. Oh, lesson 11, yeah, 7 minutes. And then 12 was also long. And then it goes back to like about 5 minutes average. I try to keep it. But yeah, you can see like these two lessons are pretty long. But I think I did a pretty good job explaining it. I will stop saying that because I may have done a horrible job, but I felt that way. Remember, Korean people use another word when referring to previous. So I saw a movie last week. Last week is not 마지막, it's 지난. In order to refer to a previous thing, 지난 is used. I drew a picture here. So last week, I'm in the 4th week. I want to say, oh, next week I'm going to Hollywood. 다음. This is when you use 다음. If you want to say, oh, last week I saw a bird, you'd say 지난주, 지난 week, last week, the previous one. Now, if you want to say the last week of my school is the worst week, or something like that, then that would be the final week. So 마지막 주. Who is? I don't know who that is. Okay. 지난 can be added immediately before some words to refer to previous thing. This often translates to last, like last week, 지난주에. 지난주에, these are all 지난 수업. See? I said 다음 수업, almost the same thing. So 저는 지난 수업을 안 들었어요. Here's another note. To say that you attend a class, you say 수업을 듣다, which literally means to listen or to hear a class. As such, you can see that the particle is attached to 수업 because the class is the noun that is being listened to. Korean learners are sometimes confused as to why is not attached to 수업 because they're accustomed to the English way of saying I didn't go to the last class. Whereas in Korean, they would just say I didn't attend last class or I didn't listen to it or hear it. Also, note that this sentence is also correct, but it is referring to a different class. 저는 마지막 수업을 안 들었어요. I didn't attend the last class. It doesn't mean the last class as in the previous class, which is here. This means final class. All right. 지난 can be added only before some words of time. So, for example, you cannot say 지난분 or 지난초. These would mean last minute, last second, as in the last minute or last second that just passed, which doesn't make any sense. Notice that they do not have the meaning I handed in my paper at the last minute. You would use 마지막 for that. 시간, however, means time in addition to being a counter for hours. So 지난 시간 can also mean last time, but not last hour. So for example, 저는 그것을 지난 시간에 배웠어요. Okay, I didn't actually understand what he was saying, and then I saw an example, and I was like, yep, that's how it's used. So you could say, oh, last time I learned something like that, like the previous time that I was here. You can use the word for 번 to refer to time something happened. So as in like, I mean, you can see, oh, did not mean to do that. Oh, did not mean to do that either. 저는 그것을 지난번에 배웠어요. I learned that thing last time. 우리는 지난번에 돼지고기를 먹었어요. We ate pork last time. 다음 is used the same way 지난 is, but for next. So, 저는 다음 주에 영화를 볼 거예요. I will see a movie next week. Like above, 다음 can be used with 시간 to mean next time, but not next hour. So, 우리는 다음 시간에 학교에 갈 거예요. Next time, we'll go to school. You could also say 우리는 다음번에 학교에 갈 거예요. We will go to school next time. You can say 나는 너를 다음번에 방문할 거야. I will visit you next time. Alright, Korean days. 일, 날, 하루. What's going on with days? I wouldn't say they're very confusing, but they are confusing. There's stuff that's very confusing. This might be just being the confusing to very confusing ballpark in Korean because there's a few different words that you need to be acquainted with. You will learn the names of the days of the week in the vocab section of another lesson. You should have noticed that every day ends in 일. 일 means day, but it's never used alone. Because if it's used alone, it means work. Okay, it might be in the very confusing territory. I'm looking at my Korean calendar now, and you see a variety of words ending in 일. Let me look at my Korean calendar and see. Can I see? No, it's too far. I cannot see. Yeah. Oh well. Don't worry about these words for now. Just recognize the importance of 일 within them. So, 총선, general election. If you want to say election day, 총선일. Same thing with 현충일, the Memorial Day. So, 일 is also the counter for days. So, I mentioned this in the video, but I don't remember the name of the show. Is it 3 days, 2 nights? Or is it 3 nights, 2 days? Something like that. But whatever. 3일 would be 3 days. I don't actually remember the name of the show. Wait, is it 3 days? 3 days, 2 nights? Yeah, okay. Yeah, 3 days, 2 nights. So, 2박 3일? Anyways, sorry. You learned in lesson 10 that you must use pure Korean numbers when counting. When you count days, however, you use the Sino-Korean numbers. So, when putting a number before 일, it doesn't matter if you use the word or numeral. So, 나는 3일 동안 공부했어요. I studied for 3 days. I'm going to start moving a little quicker because we're almost hitting the half an hour mark, and we still have not talked about all this stuff. 이번, this stuff. We still haven't talked about a lot of stuff. So, let's go back up. Alright, come on, where were we? We were here, right? Nope. Wait, where were we? We did seconds, we did this. Days. Alright. Now, so we talked about this. To make things more confusing, if you're counting days from 1 to 10, there are words that correspond to 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. The most common of these is 하루. So 하루 means 1 day. It's much more common used than 일일. I don't think I've ever heard 일일. No, I'm a liar. I've heard it before. 일일? Probably. But 2일, 3일, 4일 are much more. I don't know. I see 이틀 used. 사흘. I've heard this used once in my life. 이틀 I've seen used a lot, but probably not as much as 이일. So 저는 하루 동안 여행했어요. That's probably how you would see it. 우리는 10일 동안 한국에 있을 거예요. Did we learn how to do that? Yeah, we learned the future tense. We will be in Korea for 10 days. You can also place a Sino-Korean number before 일 to refer to a specific day in the month. Alright, so this is easy to confuse. It would seem like it would be easy to It seems like it would be easy to confuse when one is talking about the day of the month, 3일, and one is talking about a specific period, but in sentences, they're easily distinguishable. So 나는 3일에 수업을 들었어요. Obviously, I went to class on the 3rd. And then 나는 3일 동안, remember, 동안 수업을 들었어요. Or 들었어, because we're using 나는. I went to class for 3 days. So 동안 kind of gave it away here. You can also refer to a specific day and month by adding 일 and 월. So 3월 2일, March 2nd. 저는 8월 15일에 I blanked on numbers. I suck at numbers. 도착할 거예요. But usually I don't mess up like 15. And that's pretty easy. I was so close to saying oh shit, but then I was like, there's not a 50th day. What is that? 저는 So notice here, this is not 2. I think that was a question I got one time. But you have to remember that is also used for this. It's also used for teeth. It's used for a lot of stuff. So 저는 이 요금을 1월 2일에 받았어요. I received my passport on January 2nd. 날. 날 is another word to mean day and can be used as a standalone word, but not counted. So when you're talking about a specific day, you would say 그날에, that day, that specific day. But when you're saying like 3 days, you wouldn't use 3날, you'd say 3일. So that's just that. 우리는 그날에 시작할 거예요. We'll start on that day. If you want to talk about doing something on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd day, you can use 번째, which we learned in the previous lesson. I don't remember learning that, but I guess we did. With 날. So 두 번째 날에, the 2nd day, 서울에 갔어요. We went to Seoul. 저는 네 번째 날에 계획이 없어요. I have no plans for the 4th day. You can say 저는 넷째. This is like shortened. I think, actually, I do remember talking about that last lesson. 첫날 is a word that specifically refers to the first day. So 첫날에 명동에 갔어요. I think that's true for when I went to Korea. My first day I went to Myeongdong, just check stuff out. 저는 첫날에 그 여자를 만났어요. I met that girl on the first day. All right, weeks. Weeks. 주 works very similar to days. But which days are we talking about? Because we have 일, 하루, we have 날. So the one we're talking about is weeks, just like 일. Except there are no other words to worry about. So you just use the Sino-Korean numbers. When you're talking about weeks, I will go to the US next week. 다음 주에 미국에 갈 거예요. Actually, I will write up a notepad. It opens up on my second monitor. I'll put it here. And then I will write down for you guys scrap that. Probably not a good idea. I was going to write down which numbers you would use. So like 주, 일, you would use like Sino-Korean numbers. But then I realized that that's just stuff you'll learn overall. It's not something you write down. I guess you could, but... Alright, the word 주 can also be used as a counter to count weeks. When counting weeks, just like when counting days, Sino-Korean numbers are used. When putting a number before 주, it doesn't matter if it's a word or numeral. So for example, 저는 2주 동안 한식을 안 먹었어요. I didn't eat Korean food for 2 weeks. That sounds like a sad day. Or sad 2 weeks. I haven't had Korean food in forever. Since, when was I in Korea? December, January? Yeah, so 8 months-ish. 저는 4주 동안 여자친구를 안 만났어요. I'm not going to say what I was thinking. The word 주일 can also be used as a counter for weeks. This is acceptable, but it sounds a bit more natural to use 주 as shown above. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. The word 주일. Okay. It can be used as a counter, but it's a bit more natural just to use 주, like here. So here's just a couple examples. Now, 달 and 개월. we talked about 달 being pure Korean, 개월 being Sino-Korean. So if you're using the Sino-Korean one, you're going to use Sino-Korean numbers. If you're using the pure Korean one, you're going to be using pure Korean numbers. I think that's pretty straightforward. In the calendar, you'll see 월 used. And when you do use 월, you're going to be using the Sino-Korean. So this is 일, 월, not 한 or 하나, 월. That would be very strange. When counting months, you either use 달 or 개월. I already said this. There is no difference in meaning, and both are used quite frequent. When putting a number before 달, I prefer to write the Korean word. When putting a number before 개월, it doesn't matter if you use the word or numeral. 저는 2달 동안 한국어 수업을 들었어요. I don't use 달 for like more than 3 months, like 한 달, 두 달, 세 달, maybe 네 달, 4 months. But then afterwards, I just switch to 개월. That could just be me. That's probably just me. Yeah, let's scrap that. So here, 저는 이 개월 동안 한국어 수업을 들었어요. I took a Korean class for 2 months. My Korean grammar teacher told me years ago that 동안 is actually incorporated into the meaning of 달, which would mean that you don't have to put 동안 after 달. Still, most people use 동안 after 달. So 2달 한국어 수업을 들었어요. That's actually true. I never thought of that. That would be totally normal. All right, Korean years, 년. Years are used just like weeks, which means that you can use the Sino-Korean numbers. Nothing to worry about. When putting a number before 년, it doesn't matter if you use the number or the numeral. You can say 3년 동안. You can write it out. You can just put the number. 형을 안 만났어요. I didn't meet my brother for 3 years. Dang! I wish I could say this. 저는 10년 동안 한국어를 공부했어요. I wonder how good my Korean will be after 10 years. I wonder if I can do my job in Korean after 10 years. I would love to be able. Not that I would want to do my job in Korean, but I would love to be proficient enough to deal with that level of technicality in Korean. I can't even do calculus in Korean. I can't even do algebra in Korean. I can't do geometry in Korean. To think that I could do my job in Korean? That'd be pretty cool. Anyways. However, if you want to say last year, next year, you would not use 지난 다음, or 지난 년, or 다음 년. You would use separate words. Remember these words. 작년, 내년, and then the word for this year. 올해. Alright, 나는 내년에 한국에 갈 거야. I will go to Korea next year. Now, 이번. We learned how to say last week. 지난주. 지난 달, last month. We learned how to say next week, next month. 다음 달, 다음 주. How do we talk about this month? Or this week, we use 이번, 이번 주, 이번... Sorry, I just read what he wrote. I made a very similar mistake, except I didn't say 번, I just said 이. And yeah. Anyways, when you use 이번, just like 지난, 다음, you can't use it for year though. For year, 이번 년, you would say 올해. So this year. So 저는 이번 주에 계획이 없어요. I have no plans this week. 저의 어머니는 올해 한국에 올 것입니다. My mom will come to Korea this year. I don't know why I lower my voice. Oh, this is going to suck because when I do the audio, it's going to be all over the place. That's fine. More work for me. Note here that it's common to see 에 omitted from the word 올해. You can also see the section above that it's not with 작년 or 내년. You cannot use 이번 when talking about minutes, seconds, hours. You can't, if you want to say, I want to go to school this hour, doesn't make any sense. But remember, in addition to meaning hour, 시간 also means time. This means that you can say 이번 시간 to mean this time. As in, 우리는 이번 시간에 많이 배웠어요. We learned a lot this time. In most other cases, more natural to say 이번에 instead of 이번 시간. So 나는 너를 이번에 안 만날 거야. I won't meet you this time. 아쉽지만, unfortunately, but 번 is also added after 지난 and 다음 for last time, next time. So 저는 박물관에 다음번에 갈 거예요. I will go to the museum next time. Or 지난번에 갔어요. I went to the museum last time, the previous time. Now per. Now this is interesting. But let's actually talk about it a little bit. So when talking about each of these units of time, you can add 에 to indicate within that unit of time how much something was done. So if you want to say per, like every 3 years, so per year, per week, I work out 3 times per week or 3 times a week. I meet that friend once per week, like that per, you add an 에. So, for example, 저는 이 약을 하루에, remember, 하루 is 1 day. 2번 먹어요, twice. So in English, I would say, I take this medicine twice a day. In Korean, this medicine, in 1 day, I eat it twice. Or I take it in English, right? They just say eat. The reason I'm pointing this out is because this is a cultural note. I have a whole episode of my podcast about that. It's very short, but Korean usually start with the more generic, the more broad information first. Like they write the year, then the month, then the day. They write the country, then the city, then the street. They write the amount of time, like the time frame, the bigger time frame, so like a whole year. And then they'll talk about how many times they do it in that year, the more specific number. So they'd start with general, end with specific. They also would say something like their last name first, which is more general. It encompasses an entire family, then specifically that one person in the family, which is their name. I just think that's a cool little tidbit. But yeah, once you want to say, I'm taking it twice a week, you wouldn't say 두 번 하루에, like you wouldn't say it that way. You would actually start with the unit of measure, the time frame, so the 1 day per day, and then you would say how many times. So 저는 그 친구를 일주일에 한 번 만나요. I meet that friend once per week. I did not know this grammatical principle. I actually thought 일주일 was one word because I heard it in a drama and I don't remember what drama it is. I do remember because I don't remember the drama, but I remember the guy was being. It must have been 그림자? Our neighborhood hero, maybe? I don't remember. I think so, because the guy was being paid to do something once per week. He was being paid like 10 grand or something. And then they framed him. They said, oh no, he wasn't being paid 10 grand. He was like embezzling that money or something like that. Why would I pay you 10 grand per week? And they kept saying, 일주일에, 일주일에. And I thought that was one word. Like, I thought that word meant per week. And then later on, I found out, oh, okay, that's what it is. Anyways, I digress. 저는 여기에 한 달에 3번 와요. I come here 3 times per month. 3 times a month. I don't usually per. I say twice a day, twice a year. I don't say per. But anyways, almost all the examples in this lesson used 동안. There's another way you can talk about them without using 동안. For example, I will go to Canada 3 days from now. However, this lesson was reaching the 6-page mark and I didn't want to overload you more than you already have. I feel like the material in this lesson alone is enough to make your head spin for a long, long while. So I will end it here. In later lessons, you will learn that stuff. And you'll learn how to do it in more complicated ways. That's it for this lesson. As a reminder, there's 1,250 example sentences in Unit 1. And that's just Unit 1. That's just 25 lessons. So if you do the math, I don't know what that comes out to be. But that's a lot. All entries are linked to... Isn't that like 50-ish maybe? I mean, 5 times 25? Maybe. I can see it, yeah. Because 5 times 20... No, 4? Yeah. It's actually 50. Dang. All entries are linked. Okay. Sorry. 50 times... What is it? 25? Yep. 25 lessons. I can do math. I'm an engineer. All entries are linked to an audio file. There's also audio files, which is pretty cool. There's sentence practice, like I was talking about. There's dictation, which is very helpful to practice speaking. I think you used to have stuff here as well. Or is that not here? Oh, is it here? Nope. But yeah, there's also stuff on the, oh, it's here, yeah. Vocab practice. No, that's lesson 1. Never mind. Check out his YouTube channel. Hopefully you like this lesson, and I will be back with the next lesson.